yeah, and then, just kind of started with a very typical, non-denominational evangelical church, and started in the Bible studies, and, just
Yeah.
all of that. And one thing led to another. And then I got into a really bad church situation. And it was basically a cult, in my opinion. And
Wow.
once I was able to step out of that and really kind of think for myself, I was able to kind of put things in perspective. So it's interesting. It's been an interesting faith journey for sure.
Yeah. And so where do you sit on, say, for instance, your eschatology? What do you think will happen when you die?
I think I'll go to heaven.
Do you think everyone will?
Um, I do.
Yeah.
I do. I believe that, that is the heart of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he reveals himself to everyone in
Mhm.
some way or fashion. And I remember when my grandmother, Jewish, was dying. She was like 100 and something years old. I mean, she was just a
Wow.
million years old. So I mean, it was just incredible. And I never got to really talk to her about my faith or anything like that. And I just have to believe that when she passed away, like God came to her and said, okay, here we are. Where
Yeah.
would you like to go? you
Yeah. I
you
love
know
that.
and I don't, yeah, I mean, I don't know where I came up with that. I don't know if I'm just trying to make myself feel better, but that just felt really authentic and genuine. I just feel like that's who he is.
Mhm.
So
I love
yeah,
that.
that's what I believe. Yeah.
So you grew up Jewish. So, is the Jewish system more open on sexuality and eroticism, or
Oh, definitely.
yeah?
Oh,
So what's that
definitely.
like? I
Oh,
mean, were
yeah.
you able to ask all of the inquisitive questions you had as a teenager growing up and exploring yourself, and it was open and
Yeah, I mean, there definitely wasn't the idea of like don't masturbate and don't, have sex before marriage. Like my mom, I remember when I was a teenager, she said to me, just be in love, like find someone that you really care about, that really cares about you, because it is a special thing.
mhm.
So just at least find someone that it's a loving, caring relationship. And I did. And there were other things that kind of, I remember some like inappropriate things that happened when I was a little girl, and I talked to my dad about it, and he was very loving and tender and sweet with me when that happened. There was no shame. So, I mean, I just feel like it was so much more open. There was not a lot of conversation about homosexuality
Mhm.
growing up. I
Mhm.
mean, I'm 51. So, 30, 40 years ago, that it just really wasn't a big thing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't talked about a lot. So my mom had a couple really cool gay friends that we loved to go visit in New York, and that was really. I grew up in Connecticut. We'd go visit them in New York, and that was really fun to see them. We called them Uncle, whatever their names were. Um, but like other than that, they were like the only gay people we knew. Even though I danced, I was a dancer, so there was a lot of gay dancers. But it just was like no big deal. There was no shame. There
Yeah.
was no, it was just people. There's people.
Yeah.
So
We have gay people in our family, but for them, it was just like no one ever talked about it. And it
yeah.
was whispered about like he's gay. And I remember my mom told me her uncle was gay. And I was like, well, then why are we not talking about this? And it's just
Yeah.
Lutheran. We don't do that. It's not our
Mhm.
business. It's the wrong way. And I think to this day, I mean, our family's divided in a lot of aspects, and that whole, okay,
Yeah.
you're gay, but I just want you to know you're going to hell. And I'm like, that's not a loving way to treat your family member. And my mom and
Not at
dad
all.
were
Not at
coming
all.
about age in the 70s. And so sexual
Mhm. Mhm.
revolution, I always refer to my parents as
Sure.
happy parents. And yeah,
Yeah.
I had that openness too. There wasn't a lot of heavy church influence at all. There was spiritual influence. And so, yeah, there was so much openness. I could ask any question with my mom. She would answer as
That's
best
so
she could
great.
and said similar things like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you to wait till you get married because I don't think you will, but wait until you're in love. Wait until it feels right. Don't let someone coerce you to do it. And I think those are the kinds of
Yeah.
tips churches and communities should be
Mhm.
presenting to
Mhm.
people, because if we're not, we're scaring these people, we're creating this anxiety, And as you had said in your email, you noticed that it
Yes.
affects Christian couples. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us
So
about
much,
that.
so much. So when I work with couples and they'll sit down with pride, like, we both waited till marriage, or one of them waited till marriage, and I'm like, well, how's your sex life?
Yeah.
Terrible. There's no freedom. There's still so much shame. They can't just
Mm,
let loose and, fly from the chandelier because that's dirty and wrong and crazy and all this stuff. And I'm like, this is what you waited for. And a lot of their belief is, where's the reward? We waited. Now we're supposed to be blessed, right? If you
instant
wait,
sex gods.
instant, right? They're going to just be like, right, exactly. Instant sex gods and goddesses. So we waited. Where are the blessings? This is one of God's promises. I'm like, no, it's not. That is not one of God's promises
Yes.
at all, you know? So, yeah, and that's the belief that, a lot of kids grow up in youth group believing if you wait, then God will bless your relationship. He will bless your sex life. He will bless your marriage. He'll bless your children. All of that. And it's bullshit. It's just,
Yes.
sorry, can I do that on your
Yep,
podcast?
absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm no stranger to the vulgar word. Trust me.
Okay. Because I cuss like a sailor. So just so you
Okay.
know.
My people. All right. Yeah, and I noticed that you have a lot of focus too on anxiety and PTSD and even eating disorders. And I couldn't help but question how those kinds of upsets in our life can actually have a deeper impact on kind of integrating our erotic selves too, especially the
Oh,
anxiety of
huge.
sex is dirty, save it for someone you love. And this idea of how we're basically told that sex will kill us if we don't wait until we're married. And then you're supposed to go, okay, go. And you're like, I've been told my whole life this is bad. And it
Right.
creates an anxiety. And so I'm wondering,
It
with
does.
just some of the applications that you offer to people who are just your everyday anxiety, is there anything specific, first of all, like listed as sexual anxiety? And what does that look like?
Mm.
And no?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of, not in the diagnostic,
Mm-hmm.
statistical manual that we use for diagnosis. Not that I'm aware of. There certainly could be. I mean, like with men, erectile dysfunction has a lot to do with that anxiety, like performance anxiety, right? So there's that. But I don't think, to my knowledge, because I don't know all the diagnoses in the entire manual, but not that I'm aware of. But anxiety just in general can certainly affect our sex life. And, for women, it's hard to just relax and just
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the experience and feel free in the experience. And for men, it affects their ability to perform, literally. So that can cause problems sexually for people, for sure. That can show up all the time. So
Yeah.
I'm recently working with a gentleman who, he's in his late 20s, and he's just a great, great, great person, great guy. And he just started dating someone and had a lot of just anxiety about just self-esteem. Like, am I good enough? His whole life, he's never felt good enough. Okay. Just in general, that's a horrible negative belief to have. And
Yeah.
that this has been his negative belief. And so this girl, approaches him, gives him her number, pursues him. He's like, this is unbelievable. This is a miracle. And things progress. They go to have sex. He can't perform
Mm.
because I'm not good enough. Like, it's that negative belief. I'm not good enough.
Wow.
And it came out in that way, and everything, like the red carpet was laid out for him, and he just couldn't do it. So until they actually sat together and talked and
Mm.
created that safety, then he was able to connect with her and feel safer with her in that way. So safety is huge, because what's
Yeah.
anxiety? Anxiety is either one of two things or both. I'm not safe, or I'm not in control.
Mm.
It's one or both of those things that create the angst within us. And so
Yeah.
he felt out of control and unsafe.
And
Both of
men are
those things.
supposed to be the safety providers
Oh,
and the ones in
absolutely.
control. And so that's working
Right.
against your whole masculine image.
And they're supposed to get
Wow.
hard and stay hard forever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's that pressure, right? So, yeah.
That would be lovely. But no, that's not how it works. Do you
Not
think
naturally, anyway.
Yes. Oh God, yes. Um, do you think, I'm just curious, not that you're an expert in this particular area, or maybe you are. Do you think porn has an adverse effect on men in
Mm,
performance?
great question. Great question. There's not a one way answer to that
Mm-hmm.
question. It can.
Yeah.
It can absolutely create, again, more pressure to actually be a certain size, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're watching porn, those men are usually quite large.
Yeah.
And so there's that, like how women, when we look at magazines, we're like, oh my God, I'm not that skinny. I'm
Yeah.
not that pretty. It's the same thing. We all of a sudden, we automatically, the minute we, look at a magazine, we're not good enough, pretty enough, sexy enough, young enough, whatever. For men, I think it could have that effect too. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't look like that. How can I perform like that? So there's that pressure. Um, so it could create a lot of anxiety and then, affect how they just have intimacy, connection, how they feel safe. It's a way to like have a false sense of attachment. It's a way to have a false relationship with someone. It's a way to avoid intimacy. But it can also be used to enhance intimacy. That's why
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a one way answer.
Yeah.
I've told couples, go home and watch porn. I've done
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
I've actually done that. And if anyone in the Christian community heard me say that, they may like have a heart attack. But I have, right?
Yeah.
Because it can be an enhancement. It can be a way, it can be a resource for couples sexually.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Mm-hmm.
depends, what is your relationship with pornography? Just like anything, what's your relationship with food, money, sex,
Alcohol. Yep.
alcohol, drugs,
Yep.
shopping? Pick your poison. What's your relationship with it?
Mm-hmm.
So anything can be dysfunctional, anything can be unhealthy, anything can be used to avoid Netflix. I mean, how many people sit around for hours and hours and hours and watch
Yes.
Netflix?
Guilty
That's
binging.
not so. Me too, honey. I've done it plenty of
Yep.
times. We can share shows what we want to watch when we're done talking, but like anything can be out of balance and used to just avoid feelings and intimacy and connection.
Mm.
Anything can be used for that. Pornography can certainly be used for that. So,
And so when we're reaching for things to avoid something else, that should be the indicator for us to go, wait a
that's the
minute, is that
indicator.
what I really
Yes,
want? Or am I just
right.
running from what I really want?
Yeah,
Yeah.
what purpose, where's this coming from, and what purpose does this serve me? Is this really
Yeah.
is this really an enhancement or something that's actually hurting me?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear
So
you.
it takes awareness, right? You have to be aware of yourself to be able to ask yourself those questions,
Yes.
because so often we're just on autopilot, right?
Mm.
We come home from work, we're stressed. I'm just going to go to porn, or I'm going to go
Yeah.
eat a ton, or I'm going to, have 5 glasses of wine or something. Like pick your poison. What's
Yeah.
going on within us?
Mm-hmm.
So,
And we're not so often aware of our habits, and
correct.
we think that the habits that we pick up are fine because, well, everybody else has these same habits. Like, I mean, Netflix,
Sure.
we could sit here and justify, no, everybody else binges. Okay. Now are we pausing and reflecting
Right.
and going, but
Right.
is this a habit that's useful? And am I even aware that
Hmm.
I don't even think about what I'm doing? I just do it. Yeah.
That's that autopilot, right?
Mm,
Right. And we wake up one day and we're miserable and we wonder why.
yeah.
Or we're not happy sexually, or we're not happy in our faith, or we're not happy in our relationship. Well, let's start, looking inward and figuring out what's going on.
Yeah. So what do
That's
you
a lot of
know?
work to do that.
Oh God, tell me about it. I know. I've been going through the last 3 or 4 years, but just very intentional about paying attention to myself and watching myself transform, embracing a transformation, thinking differently. And
Mhm. Mhm.
it really helps you realize how many little patterned and programmed ways that, like, I was doing things that I was like, that's so dumb. I wasted so much time doing that just
Mhm. Mhm.
because, well, that's the way it's always been done. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
true. So
So you
true.
said you see transformation every day. I read it in I think one of your blogs or something, and I thought, I would really like
Yes.
to know what
Yes.
that looks like. And so you work with people who are, let's say, I know, for instance, eating disorders. So what
Mhm.
is that
Mhm.
like to just kind of watch somebody go through that transformation and start to finally see themselves and heal themselves and love themselves?
Well, just like anything, I mean, people have to want to change, right? And so that's always the first hurdle, especially someone with an eating disorder, because there's always that fear of, let's say it's someone with anorexia, it's the fear of getting fat. So we have to be able to say, okay, the eating disorder is a symptom, whatever the eating disorder is, whether it's binge eating disorder, anorexia, orthorexia, whatever it is, what's underneath. The eating disorder is merely a symptom of pain,
Hmm.
of probably some trauma in there, of something that's underneath that then drives the eating disorder to help you get back a sense of control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, it's all about, it's feeling out of control or unsafe. And eating disorders are very anxiety driven.
Mm.
So it's getting back that sense of safety and control. So I'm going to hyper focus on my food. I'm going to think about it 24 hours a day. I'm going to count my calories. I'm going to exercise like crazy. This is going to be what I focus on so that I can avoid my pain.
Mm.
Okay. So the transformation comes with, we get underneath the eating disorder. Now, clearly, if they're anorexic and they need nutritional support, we have to get all these resources in place so that the client is going to be okay medically. That's always the first step. But to do the emotional work, we got to get underneath the behaviors, because the behaviors are just a symptom. So we get into the trauma, we get into the pain, and help them learn how to feel the feelings, face the shit, work through, process their trauma so they don't need this false sense of control. It's a false sense of safety. It's all fantasy. It's not real. And they're dying. So clearly
Mm.
it's not really working for them. When they can really see that and want to live and want to have this healthy relationship with food in their body, that's a huge transformation. Then they don't need this unhealthy thing to survive anymore. They can do it with healthier coping mechanisms. And you can't remove something without replacing it with something else. So we can't
Mm.
just get rid of the behaviors like overnight. We have to slowly but surely remove them and replace them with healthier coping mechanisms. And that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, that really kind of stuck out to me. I hadn't thought about that. I was reading that on something you'd written about, and you're like, if you're going to get rid of the addiction, you have to replace it. And I'm like, we're always told we just have to get rid of stuff.
Right.
And no one's ever giving us like the substitute. Okay, you're not gonna do meth. Go do yoga. No one ever. I like yoga, um, but
I do too.
did not use meth before. But not knocking
I was
on
gonna
anyone who's
say,
healed from
I
that
thought you were
either.
gonna
But I'm just
say
saying,
I like math. Yeah.
no. But that's the one thing that I see, kind of just like a lot of failure in application with a lot of the positive life coaching and
Hmm.
positive encouraging speakers. It's like they tell you all these fancy things and break this and walk away from this and ignore this and let go of this, but no one ever comes in and tells us, but you have to replace it, because we are creatures of habit and because we are addicted to things. I'm addicted to coffee. I'm addicted to nicotine.
Yeah.
I tend to be a little addicted to sex. It's not that bad. I'm a functional sex addict. No. I know that's a serious thing. But I
Yes.
really appreciate that you point that out. You talk about how that's very important in implementing this new idea or a new
Hmm.
habit, a healthy habit.
Hmm.
Now, you don't recommend maintaining that new habit though all the time, right? Or do you tell people do this habit, love it, grow from it, heal from it, but then switch it up again so they don't maybe, because a person could say, I'm going to give up drinking and I'm going to become a jogger and then get addicted and then
Right. That
maybe
could become a whole other,
and pull
again,
back
everything
some.
has to be right.
Yeah.
Again, it has to be, we always have to be evaluating, am I using now jogging,
Yeah.
something that's so healthy and good for me? Am I now using it as a way to avoid?
Yeah.
Right? And so we always just have to be really honest with ourselves. And the other piece is this that I want to add to the coping mechanisms, whether they're unhealthy or healthy coping mechanisms, we all have a choice. And so if someone
Mm.
comes in and let's say they're bulimic and they're throwing up, 20 times a day or something, and I'll say to them, look, that is one of your coping mechanisms. Okay, you have a choice. I can't, I'm not going to go home with you, so I can't stop you from throwing up.
Mm-hmm.
But we do want to have other choices eventually, so that you will always have a choice. You could go throw up, or you could go do yoga, or you could just have a drink of water, or you could just go for a walk or call a friend. Like, you could throw up. You are empowered to make that choice. So I don't want to take away people's power.
Mm,
You understand? Because again,
yeah.
that's losing control.
Yep.
When we take away someone's power, they don't have control. So I always want people to know, you still could go back to your porn. You could still go back to the binging and purging. You still could go to running 30 miles a day. Like, that is a choice.
Mm.
But is it working for you? And do you really think the consequences are what you want? Because every choice has a consequence, whether positive or negative.
I love that. That kind of taps into something that I've been kind of questioning and considering too, is this idea of, if we're just still given permission to fall back
Mm-hmm.
into our old habits, we don't hold
Mm-hmm.
this perfectionist idea for ourselves that if
Oh
I do
God,
that, I
yes.
screw up. And I know you probably deal a lot
Yes.
with perfectionism.
With my own, even that's been a battle of my own to get through.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yes, I see it every day, but I see it in myself, and like just really learning that self-compassion piece.
Yeah.
So if I slip up, it's okay. It's always
Yeah.
about, what can I learn from it? It's always an opportunity. So if I haven't binged and purged for 20 days, and then I had a horrible day and I binged all and purged all day, let's look at that. Let's see that as now an opportunity to see
Yeah.
what was going on, that you went to these coping mechanisms. It's okay. There's always something to learn. And going back to faith, that's where I feel like it's such God's love and grace. He's
Mm.
not beating us over the head with a baseball bat. What were you thinking, you stupid idiot? No, it's okay. This happened. Let's look at it. Let's learn, and let's move on. You're covered. You're loved. It's okay.
Yes.
And so to be able to practice that, for ourselves, for whatever profession you're in, and give other people the same compassion. I mean, that's just such an important part of life. And it's that's the heart of God.
Definitely. Yeah. I always think when I mess up, I kind of have this sense that God's right there going, yeah, I kind of thought it was going to work out too, but it just didn't. Like
Yeah, I love that.
I just kind of like,
Yeah.
this kind of did not work out, did it? I was hoping it would. Me too, but it didn't. So what's next,
Plan B, plan
Thank
B.
you. The
Yeah.
permission thing is very important. I love that. I have a friend. He's going through some stuff with his wife right now, but it is because he kept cheating on her.
Oh
And
man.
and I kept going like, what is it that you can't get from your wife that you keep going out to get from these women? And that's my
Hmm.
wife. She's the mother of my children. I can't do those things with
Oh
her.
yes, I hear that all the time.
God. And I'm like, for real, that's the one person you should be doing it with. But,
Yeah.
I said to him, I said, what would happen if she said, I will do that for you? I said, what would happen if she said, fine, go sleep with her? And he's like, well, I wouldn't want to anymore. And I just thought, why? Because
Takes away
it,
the
yeah, I'm
yeah,
like, oh, because it's
yes,
no
it
longer
takes away the
forbidden.
dirty and the shame of it. Yes.
Yes. And,
Yes.
I read too, I want to say it was like Dan Savage. And I know a lot of, and are you familiar with Dan Savage?
I I don't
He
know.
is a really
Sounds very
outspoken,
familiar.
he's a very outspoken, kind of, I would call him like a sex guru. And he's been on the radio
Okay.
forever. And
Okay.
he kind of and he's got a very open idea in relationships. I think he's in an open marriage, or he lets his
Okay.
husband do whatever. And so he has this thing like, he's like, just then cheat, go cheat, give permission to cheat or go cheat. And I know it's really, really radical, but there was another person I was talking with, and he just needed someone to give him permission to cheat to change his mind about it. And so he came
Yeah.
to me and he said, could I cheat on her and not tell her and still live with it? And I'm like, I think you could do it if that's what you need. Well, she's not meeting any of my desires and she's not willing to try. And I'm like, then go cheat on her. Create an elaborate plan. Make sure you keep it on the DL and cheat. And he's like, just like that, you would tell a husband to cheat. And I'm like, I think you only need permission. And as soon I said, I bet you
Yeah.
if your wife just gave you permission to be a freak, you probably wouldn't even want it that bad anymore.
Yeah.
You know? So
It's funny because when husbands do this with their wives, like they have this idealized, you know, idea or picture of what a wife and mother,
the
like
virtuous,
the
pure.
whole virtuous, pure, right?
Mhm.
Like she doesn't burp or fart,
Mhm.
like she, is just like so whatever, perfect.
Yeah.
And the freakiness has to happen with someone else where it can get raunchy and dirty and fun
Yeah.
and playful and crazy and all that other stuff. And that's so not fair.
Mm-mm.
But if that person can be honest with themselves and figure out where that is coming from and what that's about, and like, because that, I believe that's coming from, it could either be coming from trauma, or it's coming from how they were raised and how their mother and father, kind of played things out. But I mean, it's just not true. That's the
Yeah.
bottom line. It's just not true, and it's hurting your marriage and your relationship and your own sexual freedom.
Yeah.
So, because whether you give someone permission or not to cheat or to have infidelity, it's probably still damaging to the relationship,
Mhm.
right? So now that's different than an open relationship. I don't consider, if you're in an open relationship, you're not giving each other permission to cheat. That's not cheating because
Yeah.
it's an
True.
open
True.
relationship, right? So
Mhm.
I'm not counting what I just said in an open relationship. That's not going to be damaging. But to a couple that is like, we're married, we've said these vows, the expectation is we're going to only be having sex with each other, and now I give you permission to go cheat, that's going to cause damage.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
So let's figure
One
out
thing
these archetypes.
my husband said the thing that hurt him the most about my infidelity was that he was excluded. And not so much that he was
Wow,
excluded from the act, but just excluded from even a conversation, excluded from
that's so
knowing. Yeah, because I'm
interesting.
like, he'd been gone 9 months. And I was honestly like 98% of it was like, I just need to get laid so freaking bad. You have no idea. And he's like, why
Right.
couldn't you have that conversation with me? And I'm like, hi, honey. I know you're over there in Iraq fighting for our country. These vibrators just aren't doing it for me. And I just need a man. And is that okay with
Yeah,
you? Yeah. I couldn't imagine that conversation, but now
I
where we
know,
are
right?
and where we've
Yeah,
evolved and the things we've talked about and the things we've tried and just all of that is like, well, I understand you felt excluded. And he was like, we to become one. And then you go and make all these decisions without me. And that was the
that's
most
right. That's
painful experience.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I
Mm-hmm.
love that he said that to you,
Yeah.
and that you could use that in your healing process and move forward. That is awesome.
Yeah. And
That is,
we've made
yeah,
an effort to not exclude each other from our fantasies and our desires too. And like,
yeah,
because in the
yeah, yeah,
beginning,
yeah.
he'd tell me things he was into, and I was like, well, I thought I was freaky, but I don't know if I can handle this. And so, and then right after that, it was like I jumped into the evangelical circles, and I was going to church and doing Bible studies. And so I was like,
Yeah,
I don't think you're supposed to be talking to me like this. I'm your wife. We're not supposed to do things like that. And so it created a lot of shame. And I found
sure,
myself
absolutely.
shaming my husband and making him feel bad. And so
Yeah,
he closed up a lot too. And that, of course, made our sex life
sure.
suffer because we weren't being honest
Of
with each other.
course.
And I was
Right,
like,
right, right, right.
don't look, God, I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to put his cock in my mouth. Don't watch, that honestly, it's like, how do I get that image away? And a lot of people say that. I think about Jesus right there, like, you going to go down on that and I'm like, yeah, that would be creepy. So take,
Oh my God, it's awesome. I love you.
but that's what it's like for a lot of people. And I was right there. And so I understood that. And so,
Yeah,
but I mean, I
yeah,
think that speaks to a lot of where people need, if you ask me, need to pull back some more layers of their faith and what they're following
yeah,
because Jesus is
yeah.
not sitting there like, what are you doing? That's
No, I
just
think
not
he
what's going on.
understands we need our privacy.
Yeah.
So-
I remember listening to a pastor on a podcast talk about that. And he's like, I'm just hoping God is just busy when I'm getting busy. And I'm like, exactly. God's like, that's you. But I tried to convince him too. And I'm like, no, God is right there. And I'm like, you're not sitting there thinking like, while your husband is penetrating you, that is God. And he's like, can't do
No.
that. Can't go there.
I'm
And I
always
thought,
like, I'm like, this is what God created. Like,
thank
this is
you.
a
Thank
gift. This
you.
is awesome. Let's enjoy it to the fullest in every cell of our being.
Yeah, I was reading from this book, When God Was a Woman, and she writes
Mm,
about the history of female worship. And there's one, I want to say it was people who worshiped Aphrodite. When strangers would come into the new land, they
huh.
would present these women to them, like, come into our temple. It is our duty to welcome you properly by having sex with you. Like, could you imagine? Are you crossing the border? Hold on. Let me get my most beautiful ladies and give you a proper welcome. I mean, we'd look at that now like that's sex cult stuff. No. But
Right.
that was the appreciation.
That's
They're like, we're sharing this with everybody. Everybody gets it.
right.
And that's how it was, too. I mean,
Wow. That is wild.
it is wild. It's so wild. So what are some of the wild stories you get?
I don't get a lot of wild stories
No?
because you mean about sex?
Yeah.
I want to hear your stories, girl. Sounds amazing.
That's for
No,
the book.
because
No.
because so many of my clients are coming from the church and they've been so repressed. So
Mm,
I'm the one saying, go to a sex shop together, go pick out some stuff, watch some porn, like get some ideas, let's share our
yeah.
fantasies, all of that stuff. Like I'm trying to get some stuff going here.
I
Because
love
they've just
that.
been so repressed.
I know that's so sad.
It's
None
sad.
of them ever found their parents' sex toys and had questions when they were 10 like I did. No, that's just me.
No,
Oh man, my
no. What
parents,
sex toys?
oh my God, my parents had this little fun box at the end of their bed. Oh
Oh my
yeah,
gosh, that is hilarious.
it is.
That's
And well,
hilarious.
you know what? I do too. I'm not gonna lie. We have a couple fun boxes. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of toys available out there now. So
There are a lot of toys available out there now.
yeah.
A lot that I don't even know how to
Oh man, I'm
use.
gonna tell you what,
Like,
I shouldn't, but I'm
we
not gonna
need
get
like
into
a tutorial.
goodness sake, some of the stuff my husband shows me. I'm like, you want me to do what? That? Won't that hurt? Like, are you sure? And I'm like, no, don't order that. I'm not, no, that, no. Mm-mm. There are some crazy things, but I think, man, there are some serious masochists out there who just want some serious pain. But
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
interesting about sadism and masochism and even fantasies is that can be such a healing way for a lot of people to work out trauma. Like I remember
It is
reading,
the way they work out trauma.
like even
Yes,
like a
that is
rape
the
victim
way.
reenacting raping her partner or being raped by her partner, but giving permission and being included in it and it healing
And
her.
again,
And I'm like,
getting her power back because she's getting her
yes,
power back through something like that.
yeah,
And again, that will take a lot of preparation before
yeah,
a rape victim should do that. FYI for any listeners out there, but
yeah,
it takes a lot of preparation first. But because the last thing we want to do when processing trauma is getting re-traumatized.
yeah,
So it's very important that there's a lot of safety measures in place and a lot of preparation, just so your listeners know. But yes,
definitely.
I agree. And what was the book? I have it on my shelf, but that's what he talks about with fantasy, that it's all about a way to process our trauma and remove shame
Yes.
from sex.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fantastic. Oh, I mean, well, I don't want to leave you right now, but I mean, like I have it on my shelf. I just can't think of the name at the moment, but it's a phenomenal book. And that's what he talks about. Has a peach on the cover. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm
Well,
sure.
I gotta
I
get
don't
it.
think I have it. You can get it.
Your Brain on Sex.
Ooh, I don't know that book.
Yeah, Stanley Siegel.
All right.
How Smarter Sex Can Change Your Life.
Your Brain on Sex. I'm going to write this
Yeah.
down.
Why you need to think more about sex.
Oh, I don't think I
Yeah.
need to think any more about
Not
sex. No.
you, but
Girl, I have to shut it
it's really
off.
good.
Like, no.
I love the peach on the cover. I
do
just love
too.
that.
I do too. I love that.
Anyway, but he talks a lot about fantasy and understanding that there's meaning in our fantasies because people have shame about their fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
Like I shouldn't be thinking about being with another woman, or I shouldn't be thinking about being with another man.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean I'm gay? Like, right? Those are the thoughts that
Yes.
start to come up. And they don't share their fantasies because there's so much shame with the fantasy. But the
Mm-hmm.
shame has, I mean, the fantasies have meaning,
Yes.
and it's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's really, really okay.
Oh,
So
I
it's a great
agree.
book.
I agree. My
Great book.
husband, the way my husband has been fantasizing lately, is incredible actually, because I'm like, here you were when I met you, this skinny little military, nationalistic, conservative, I love my country. And now
Yeah.
I mean, some of the things we talk about, I'm just like, if you're if your military friends heard you talking like this. No.
Yeah.
But it's actually it creates so much safety because we feel
Hmm.
like we can literally say anything. And neither one of us are
Isn't
at
that
that
so
point where
great?
we're
Yeah.
like, that's fucked up, you know? Well,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but I've had to, and it was hard because a lot of things he'd bring up, he'd be like, okay, I want to share. Okay. And I have to be like, Danielle, hold your face. Do not make any facial expressions. Because I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of stuff in the beginning was really hard. And I was like,
Sure. Sure.
who does he think I am? Like, what? But that was the
Right.
most important part in going, I hear what you say. I need to think about it. I
Hmm.
can't make a decision
Hmm.
on that. I appreciate you sharing that with me. But instead, so many people, and I've heard my friends tell me, they're like, my husband can better not even ask me for a blowjob. Like, who does he think I am? And I'm like, you're his wife. Like,
Right.
he can't ask
Right.
you for a blowjob because it's
Right.
disrespectful. Like, really?
Wow. Yeah.
So
Wow.
we've created so many different narratives over sex
For
from this
sure.
puritanical view. But then I think a
Hmm.
lot I mean, feminism has its place and has influenced me so heavily, and I have such an appreciation for it. But in some aspects, it goes a little too radical, like
Right.
porn is bad or even sex is bad. And so
Right.
what that influence is, and I just read this article today, is something called a sexual anorexia where
Huh.
people, yeah, I never heard of it before. And so apparently it's the opposite of a sexual addict in that
Right. Right.
they're so scared of physical connection and intimacy.
Oh, breaks my heart.
Yeah. And do you see that a lot? Just
Um,
scared of that kind of closeness?
definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah, and it's usually connected again to trauma, right?
Always
That is
is, isn't
not,
it?
it kind of is.
Those
I
traumas
mean,
just follow
these
us.
they really do, and they come out in all these different ways, right? In all these different ways, and so that's why people don't realize a lot of their issues come from trauma. They're like, why am I getting chronic headaches? Why do I get migraines? You know, like I need to just constantly take medication, medication, medication. And it's like, well, you know, I'm thinking there's some trauma underneath that, and this is your body's way of expressing it. So same thing with sexual anorexia. I love that term. I mean, it's such a great term,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so true. Like that, like restricting yourself from sex and sexual contact.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how God has wired us.
Yeah.
We are meant to be connected. You hear this all the time in church. We're meant to be connected to each other, but like connected to each other,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
touching each
Yeah.
other and feeling each other. And, you know, skin to skin contact is connection and being attached to each other and feeling safe in those attachments, and then having that organically be a sexual connection. I mean, that's God's intention, and that's how we're wired. We are
Yeah.
wired as sexual creatures, and I'm so grateful he wired us this way.
Oh, amen. I know. And the idea that we want to say that those urges and those desires that we have is somehow of a fallen nature, I think. No.
Yeah,
No.
no, no.
God,
It's trauma. It's trauma.
it's definitely trauma. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, wow. Trauma, trauma,
Trauma
trauma.
is so pervasive. I got to tell
It
you.
is, and
You know,
here's
when
the
I
thing, and it just pull
yeah,
out of nowhere. It's activated, and you're like, where did that come from?
absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and when I started my practice, um, gosh, so 16 years ago now, I started as an eating disorder specialist, and I, you know, just everyone was coming in, but I saw other people too, like depression, anxiety, and it just was like the trauma that was coming through my door. Like I couldn't treat, like I said, it was a symptom of a deeper issue, right? And so every person that was coming through my door just had so much trauma that I had to get trained in real deep trauma therapy, because otherwise I couldn't help anybody. So yeah, trauma is just kind of the root of it all. It's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I've been working on writing this kind of like non-expert marriage advice book kind of thing. And I start opening up a concept and I think, you know what? I need to go back here now. And that you need this whole new
Right,
chapter
right,
because you need to go, look, I didn't get to where I am until I dealt with all my
right.
shit. And so
Exactly.
it's so
Exactly.
unfair in some aspect that, and I get that. I think that's why I get a lot of pushback, especially with the topics I write about. I know it's a little unfair for me to go, but it's good right here, unless I go, only if you're willing to work on all the
Mm-hmm.
shit that you've been lugging
Right,
around your whole life and
right,
trying to
right,
avoid. And it does
right.
start with that trauma. And it's funny, I was spanked as a child and I hated it.
Okay.
And I
Mm-hmm.
justified spanking as a parent with my first two
Mm-hmm.
children.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came to some understanding where I was like, you know what? I don't think this is right. And then after I came to this understanding that spanking was wrong, because I was on the fence for a long time and I was like, honestly, like, it's not abuse to spank your child. Stop it, people. Then along the doors of opening up what my fantasies were, I came to realize that I actually liked being spanked.
Oh,
And isn't that funny? And I started
yeah.
asking people who I also knew were spanked as children. And I was like, is that one of your things? All of them, hands down. Hated being spanked as a kid.
Wow.
Now it's that thing. It's that thing I desire.
So again, that's what the book talks about that I was
Mm,
telling you about, the your brain on sex, is that you were shamed as a child with the spanking,
mm.
and then it becomes a fantasy, or it's something that you want in sex, because now something that used to feel shameful now feels good.
Oh, that's awesome. Just saying it like
Right?
that. Now it
Right.
feels good. How beautiful would that be
Yeah.
if all those things that make us feel shame were all of a sudden like, no,
Right.
that makes me feel good.
Right. Yeah.
Good, good stuff. So what else do you do? What else are what you focus on trauma and what is working with
Mm-hmm.
PT?
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask you,
Yes.
PTSD.
Yes.
Can you get that just from a president being elected? I mean, I'm not
I
trying to joke
don't.
or make light of it. I kind of
No,
am,
no,
but
no,
I
no.
want to
When I
take it
saw
seriously
that,
too.
I saw that on your
My
notes. I
notes.
laughed so hard. I laughed so hard. I can't. Again, there's no blanket statement to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
But there's two types of trauma. There's little T and big T.
Mm,
Okay, the big T trauma, obvious, like car accident, a rape, a fire, a loss of a child, things like that. Okay,
mm-hmm.
those are big T traumas, obviously. The little T trauma is what we live in every single day that just grates and wears on us, and like growing up with an alcoholic parent, growing up with a yeller, growing up with someone who throws things all the time. Maybe you were never hit with anything that was thrown, but you never knew what was going to come flying through the air.
Mm.
Like that's the everyday little T trauma that really wreaks havoc on our nervous system. And in our brain, it affects our brain the same way, whether it's little T or big T. Now, are people distraught and angry and emotional about our current president? Absolutely. Does it, in my definition of trauma, does that qualify? No. But I'm also not going to judge someone else's
Yeah,
experience and say,
yeah.
that's not trauma. What are you nuts? I mean, on the day of the when the election results came in, a few years ago, I had other therapists who I was seeing at the time come in, couldn't function, couldn't go to work that day,
Wow.
were a wreck. And I'm like, you got to pull your shit together. You got to go to work.
You're
Like,
a therapist. What are you doing?
you're a therapist. To shame them, but I'm like, come on, girl, use your resources. Let's go. You have clients that are distraught over the results. You need to go help them, right? So that was real emotion. I mean, that was real, genuine
Yeah,
distraught, right? Um, do they need to process it? I don't know. I mean, I can't judge that. I
yeah,
can't judge that. And also, a lot of how we are traumatized is based on previous trauma,
yeah.
and how what we're experiencing now, what is that landing on top of? So again, like if I've been in a couple little fender benders, okay, not too bad. And then I get into a bigger car accident. Now that big car accident is landing on those other fender benders. Now it's all like
Yep.
coming together as the
Okay.
trauma that I need to process. You understand?
Yep.
So that's why certain, your husband in the military, certain soldiers can come back from war and have had the exact same experience, been in the trenches side by side. One of them comes back completely traumatized and one of them does not.
Mm.
How do you explain that? Because of how their brain is wired and previous traumas that maybe they had.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. So
That's
I can't,
good.
yeah. So you got my
It's good to
opinion, but I'm
know.
certainly not going to judge anybody.
Well, but no, I mean, it's hard. I mean, PTSD was circulating on like the Twitter feed in the last week, something with Ilhan Omar, and a lot of
Yeah.
people were throwing shade at her. And then something got brought up about all the fake PTSD claims after Trump. And I thought, well, we should try and look at this respectively, though. Well,
Hmm.
in the Ilhan Omar's case, I'm like, well, she came from Somalia. That couldn't have been a non-traumatic experience. But
Right.
just
Right.
this idea that we're not willing to give people the benefit of compassion and consideration when they say something like
Exactly.
that. So
Exactly.
it's nice to have a
Hmm. Hmm.
professional say something about it, at least to kind of clear the air. Cause that kind of always irks me sometimes. I don't
Right.
want to get in the habit of thinking it's okay for us to go, I'm going to make fun of you because you just said that. And I don't believe you really have it. When me and my husband were going to couples therapy a few
Hmm.
years ago, while we were within the session, something happened, like just in our garden. This loud sound went off and just freaked him out, and he went into this panic. And I think we went and saw our therapist in the next few
Yeah.
days, and he brought it up, and she's like,
Yeah. Hmm.
"Okay, what
Hmm.
did that make you think of?" He's like, "I felt like I was in Iraq. What the hell was that?"
Yep.
And she kind of
Yep.
showed him. She's
Yep.
like,
Yep.
"Sometimes they don't show signs for until
That's right.
something just out of nowhere pops it up and
Absolutely true.
activates it."
Absolutely true.
Wow. Okay, so final question.
Yes.
Do you think on some level, and this I do, so I just want to see where you think, that we all just kind of suffer from anxiety?
Yeah. And why is that? Because we all need to have a sense of control and feeling safe.
Yes.
Those are our human,
Yep.
again, God has wired us this way. And that's
Yes.
why in faith, trusting God is
Mhm.
part of dealing and managing our own anxiety,
Mm.
right? Because this is how we're wired. We need a sense of control. We need to feel safe.
Mhm.
And if we don't, we will have anxiety. And it's just a spectrum. Some people have a lot more, some people have a lot less. It just, everyone's different, and that's okay. But again, know yourself, know where you're at, and know that there are tools to manage it. And if you are a person of faith, that God does want to help you with that. He doesn't want you to suffer alone. So he gets
Yeah.
it. He
That's
gets
what
it.
that's what my belief in God has been the most for me, is just a constant reminder that when I am feeling alone, that when I'm feeling
Hmm.
unsafe,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
God is there. And I
absolutely.
understand why people can't get with that because of logic
I do
and
too.
math and all that, but at the same time, I'm
And
like,
he's not concrete. He's not a person we can touch. you know
tangibility. Yeah.
that's the big piece. So that makes it really hard for people when they're in distress of any sort, to and that's why it drives me nuts in the church. If someone's in distress, oh, you just need to pray more, you just need to go to your Bible.
Yeah.
That
It doesn't help.
advice makes my skin crawl. But it's a practice, just like going to yoga or going to meditation or doing it. It's a practice in
Mhm.
learning to trust that God is there in your pain, in your
Yes.
fears, in your anxiety, in your worry, in all of it. He's right there. So yeah,
Mm. Good
that's that's
stuff.
my that's
All
my
right.
story. I'm sticking to it.
I love that. Oh, Lesley, this has been awesome. Thank you so
So
much.
fun, Danielle. My gosh, thank you for having me.
So
So
please
fun.
just remind people where they can find you, where they can learn more about you.
Okay, okay. Well, my website is denverfamilycounselingservices.com. You can find me on Facebook at Denver Family Counseling, as well as Instagram. So, yeah, and my email is Lesley, Lesley, period, DFCS at gmail.com if you want to email me with any questions. So, yeah.
And it's Goth, right? Lesley Goth.
Yeah.
I sat there and I'm
Lesley
like,
Goth,
is that a tricky
Goth.
name?
Yeah.
Or is it the cool name that I think it is? It is I posted that I was interviewing you and I shared one of your blogs and
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Thank you.
someone goes, is that her real name? And I'm like, what kind of question did you just, I'm like, nope, I just made it up. Don't even know who she is yet. Lesley Goss, Denver Family Counseling
Yes.
Services. Thank you so much. This has
Yes.
been
Thank you,
awesome.
Danielle.